The sun was a brutal, indifferent eye high above the New Mexico territory. Heat shimmered off the pale, cracked earth of the plains, warping the distant horizon into a watery mirage. Young Elijah, Eli Thorne, 14, small for his age, with eyes perpetually squinted against the glare, rode a sway-backed mule named Dusty. The only sound was the creak of the dry leather saddle and the insistent metallic buzz of flies around Dusty's ears. Eli had been riding for 2 days, a canvas sack of flour and a rusty Colt 45, too big for his small hands, a dead man's keepsake, his only possessions. He wore a faded blue denim shirt, a worn leather vest, and a cheap, sweat-stained Stetson that offered scant protection from the scorching midday sun. He breathed air thick with alkali dust. The ramshackle settlement of Fort Sumner finally appeared. A cluster of sun-bleached adobe buildings huddled together like tired old men, dominated by the hulking remains of the old military fort. The town was a cesspool of whispers and bad debts, its main street a trough of deep, churning dust. A dry, rasping wind whistled through the cracks in the dilapidated saloon, the last chance. Eli tied Dusty to a hitching post outside the general store. The clink of his spurs on the wooden boardwalk felt unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. He could smell cheap whiskey, stale tobacco, and the metallic tang of dried horse sweat. Inside the store, the air was cooler, but heavy with the scent of unwashed wool and gun oil. The general store owner, Mr. Crandall, 60s, nervous spectacles, looked up, wiping his hands on a filthy apron. He recognized the boy. Everyone in this corner of the territory did, after a fashion. Eli was the kid who always seemed to be around trouble, smelling the smoke before the fire. "Good day, son. Your business is with us, or are you just passing through again?" Crandall's voice was dry as bone meal. "Just need flour, sir, and maybe a pound of them coffee beans." Eli placed 2 silver dollars on the counter. The coins were dull and worn smooth. Crandall scooped the money, his eyes flickering toward the street, a telltale sign of the anxiety gripping the town. A tension thrummed beneath the surface, a low, dangerous frequency that made men check their six-shooters. "Got a new sheriff in town, Eli. Pat Garrett. Mean as a rattler and twice as fast with a scattergun. He ain't taking kindly to strays." Crandall lowered his voice to a conspiratorial murmur. "Heard that name. They say he's hunting hard for Billy the Kid." Eli kept his face neutral, but the name made his pulse jump. Billy the Kid was a legend, a ghost painted across the territory's bleak landscape. Hunting hard is a kindness, boy. He's got that boy's bloodlust in his eyes. Garrett's wearing a badge, but he's still just a hungry wolf. And the kid, he's still somewhere out here, like a storm on the horizon. Crandall poured the beans, the hissing sound of them hitting the tin scoop punctuating his words. As Eli stepped back onto the boardwalk, the tension snapped. A sudden rhythmic thudding filled the air, the sound of a powerful horse being ridden hard. Eli squinted. A man rode into the main street, pulling his horse to a dusty, spectacular halt. It was Billy the Kid, 19, lean, electric blue eyes, wearing a simple linen shirt and a leather vest, his Colt 45 Peacemaker resting casually in its holster. He looked younger than the wanted posters claimed, more like a boy than the most feared outlaw in the territory. His presence was a palpable shock, cutting through the heat like a cold blade. Billy dismounted with fluid, reckless grace, his eyes scanning the street with a predatory intensity. He seemed to drink in the sudden silence of the terrified townsfolk. "Any of you yellow bellies seen a tall man with a big hat and a bigger badge?" Billy's voice was clear, carrying easily down the silent street. No one answered. The wind picked up, swirling dust devils around the outlaw's worn leather boots. "Thought not. Crandall, get me a bottle of your best corn liquor and keep the change, unless you want me to come fetch it myself, old man." Billy gave the store a hard look. Before Crandall could move, a deep, gravelly voice echoed from the end of the street, where the shadow of the old fort wall lay darkest. "Save your trouble, kid. I'm right here. Pat Garrett, 30s, tall, imposing, an aura of grim certainty, his sheriff's star glinting dully on his heavy coat, walked into the sunlight. He carried a Winchester rifle balanced casually, but his hand hovered near the six-shooter on his hip. His shadow stretched long and menacingly toward the outlaw. Billy smiled, a flash of pure, dangerous youth. "Sheriff Garrett, took you long enough to catch the scent, partner. This is where it ends, Billy. You lay down that iron. Now." Garrett's tone was flat, final. The air tasted like gunpowder. Eli, clutching the bag of flour, understood suddenly that he was standing exactly where the world was about to break. He dove behind a heavy water trough, the wooden planks rough against his cheek. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the nervous stamping of Billy's horse. The showdown had begun. Eli's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden suspended terror of Fort Sumner. He held his breath, waiting for the first shot that would shatter the world. The moment stretched like a piece of chewed tobacco, slow and bitter. Pat Garrett's eyes were fixed on Billy the Kid, not with rage, but with a cold, professional focus. Billy, standing in the middle of the dusty street, was a study in restless energy, his fingers flexing near the grip of his Colt. "It never ends, Pat. Not for me. You ought to know that." Billy chuckled, a sound without humor. "I know you're tired of running, kid. I'm tired of chasing. Let's settle it before someone innocent gets winged." Garrett's rifle remained steady, aimed low. A small dog, unaware of the cosmic tension, darted across the street, its bark a sudden, sharp intrusion. It was enough. Billy's hand was a blur. The Colt Peacemaker cleared leather with a speed Eli had never imagined possible. Bang! The sound was an explosive thunderclap in the oppressive quiet. A plume of dust erupted from the wall just beside Garrett's head. Garrett didn't flinch. He raised the Winchester, 2 quick shots from the rifle. The bullets struck the ground where Billy had been standing a heartbeat before. Billy had already moved, darting behind the wooden awning of the blacksmith shop. Eli felt the concussion of the shots deep in his chest. The gunfight had begun. It wasn't a clean duel. It was a desperate, chaotic exchange of lead. The townspeople, already indoors, pulled their shutters tight. The air filled with the sharp smell of burnt powder and cedar smoke. "You're slipping, Pat. You're getting old," Billy's voice taunted from behind the blacksmith's shed. "You're out of time, kid," Garrett yelled back. Garrett moved with surprising agility for such a large man, taking cover behind a heavy water wagon. He reloaded the rifle with practiced ease, the clink of the brass casings hitting the dry earth. Eli, crouched low, risked a glance. He saw Billy dart across an alleyway, taking a position near the back of the saloon. Billy was making for the stable, clearly planning an escape. The kid was aiming to use the town's labyrinthine structure to his advantage. Suddenly, a woman's cry echoed from the saloon. Sally, 30s, the saloon owner's wife, terrified, had peeked out a window and realized the line of fire crossed directly in front of her. Billy hesitated. The moment of humanity was a fatal one. Garrett seized the opportunity. He fired 3 quick rounds from the Winchester, forcing Billy to stay low. "Drop the gun, kid! The saloon's full of folk!" Garrett's voice was a command. Billy didn't drop the gun, but he ceased his movement toward the stable. Instead, he darted into the side door of the saloon. "Stay where you are, Eli." The voice came from right beside the water trough. Eli jumped, spinning to see a man in a filthy, dust-covered coat and a drooping mustache. It was Doc Pullen, 40s, a known bounty hunter, hard eyes, his Derringer pistol already aimed at the boy. Pullen was taking advantage of the chaos, his attention split between the gunfight and the chance for a score. "You're the kid's errand boy, ain't you? I saw you talking to him last month in Lincoln. You're worth a few dollars." Pullen's breath smelled of bad liquor. Eli knew Pullen was a lowlife, a man who'd sell his own mother for a shot of cheap whiskey. He was a second danger, a vulture circling the real fight. "I ain't his boy. I just run errands. Leave me out of this, mister." Eli tried to sound tough, but his voice cracked like dry wood. "Too late, tenderfoot. You saw me. You're a witness." Pullen took a menacing step closer, his eyes glued to the saloon door. Garrett, distracted by the melee inside the saloon, had moved to the front entrance, his heavy boots crunching the dry gravel. The muted sounds of smashing bottles and desperate shouts came from inside. Eli had to act. He fumbled for the Colt 45. The weight was clumsy in his small hands. "Drop it, Pullen!" Eli tried to steady his aim. Pullen laughed, a coarse, rattling sound. "That's cute, boy. Now put that toy down." Pullen was ready to shoot. Eli closed his eyes, remembering the words of the man who gave him the gun. "Don't pull it unless you mean it, son. This ain't a game." Just as Pullen tensed his trigger finger, a loud whooping war cry erupted from the edge of town, the sound unnatural and chilling. A group of nearly 20 Apache warriors, their faces painted, rode in silent precision around the fort wall. They were magnificent and terrifying, their horses moving with a ghost-like quiet. They weren't looking at the gunfight, they were looking at the town, and their silence was more menacing than any gunshot. Pullen froze, his attention fully diverted by the sudden, overwhelming threat. Eli used the split-second hesitation. He fired the Colt 45. The shot went wide, hitting the dirt near Pullen's feet, but the noise, combined with the Apache's sudden arrival, caused Pullen to lose his nerve. The bounty hunter bolted, running toward the stables, away from both the sheriff's war and the new deadly danger. Eli, breathing hard, lowered the smoking gun. The Apache contingent had circled the town and now stood completely silent, watching the boy. The leader, Chief Cullen, 50s, scarred, profound calm, dismounted, his movements economical and powerful. Eli was surrounded, caught between the law, the outlaw, and the land's original owners. The arrival of the Apache warriors instantly cooled the tension of the gunfight, replacing it with a deeper, more primal fear. Garrett, emerging from the saloon entrance, his face grim, saw the situation immediately. He raised his hands slightly, his Winchester held loosely but ready. "Stay put, everyone! Do not make a move!" Garrett commanded the unseen townsfolk. Chief Cullen walked slowly toward the center of the street, ignoring Garrett completely. His eyes were fixed on Eli, still crouched by the water trough, the smoke from the Colt 45 dissipating in the dry air. The warriors surrounding the town remained mounted, statues carved from bronze and leather. The only sounds now were the jingle of the horses' tack and the soft, sifting sound of the wind moving the fine sand. Cullen stopped a few feet from Eli, his presence a powerful, unreadable force. Eli stood slowly, holding the heavy pistol. He knew the code. "You didn't run from a warrior. You faced him with quiet respect." "I did not mean to intrude on your people, sir. I was defending myself." Eli spoke the words he'd heard old prospectors use when faced with trouble, calm, brief, and honest. Cullen didn't speak. He simply pointed to the smoking Colt in Eli's hand, then pointed to Pullen's retreating back, a mere speck near the horizon. It was a silent, calculated question. "That man, he wanted to kill me for being near the fight. He is a coward. He runs from real trouble." Eli met the chief's dark, intelligent eyes. Cullen then pointed to the saloon, where Billy the Kid was likely still hiding. Then he pointed to Garrett, standing ready with his rifle. He was asking, "Whose side are you on in this war?" Eli looked at the sheriff, the symbol of the new law, a man hunting a boy. He looked toward the saloon, where the legendary outlaw represented a kind of savage, untamed freedom. He looked back at Cullen, representing the original claim on the land, a force of nature. "I am on the side of the just. But I do not know which one that is today, sir. All I saw was one man hunting another, and a third man trying to use the confusion for dirty coin. I protect myself." Eli placed the Colt on the ground, a sign of trust and respect. Cullen finally spoke. His voice was deep, resonant, and calm. "The boy has eyes that see the truth, not the flag. You fire the ancient weapon, but you do not carry the warrior's spirit. Yet." Cullen gestured to a patch of dry grass. "Sit. We have business with the white man's law." Eli sat. The Apache warriors dismounted, forming a loose, disciplined circle around the main street. They seemed to possess a spiritual stillness that defied the chaos of the moment. Garrett approached slowly, his face etched with caution. "Chief Cullen, this is my town and this is my warrant. You have no business here." Garrett's voice was firm, but lacked its previous arrogance. Cullen raised a hand, stopping the sheriff instantly. "This is the land of my fathers. The dust remembers our names, Sheriff. Your law is a thin skin over a deep scar. You hunt the Saches Klizan, the White Killer, but the killing does not stop with him. We seek passage, and we seek to know if your war will follow our trail." Cullen's tone was accusatory. The atmosphere was thick, the confrontation between the lawman and the chief a more profound and weighted standoff than the duel with Billy. It was a confrontation of two worlds. "My war is with outlaws, not with your people, Chief. We're only passing through this dry wash." Garrett tried to sound conciliatory. Cullen laughed, a short, hard sound. "The white man always says he is passing through. Then he builds a fort." The chief gestured to one of his warriors, who brought forth a beautifully woven Navajo blanket. He laid it in the center of the road, placing two objects upon it: a small, smooth river stone and a single, rusted U.S. cavalry spur. "This is the test of the silent voice. The stone is the law of the earth, constant, hard, unmoving. The spur is the law of the boot, moving, sharp, leaving only dust. We have seen the boy choose his place. Now you choose yours, Sheriff." Cullen stepped back. Garrett stared at the object, sweat beading on his brow. The sun beat down mercilessly. He understood the immense, unspoken threat. He could not fight both the kid and the Apache. He had to show respect or face an annihilation far worse than any outlaw could deliver. He walked forward, slowly. Eli watched, his stomach tight. Garrett hesitated. Then, with a deep sigh, he walked to the blanket. He picked up the stone. He placed the cavalry spur on the ground and ground it into the dust with the heel of his boot. A clear, powerful sign of submission to the land's older, unmoving authority. Cullen gave a slight nod. "The law of the stone is patient. Now go. Finish your small war, but do not cross the shadow rock outside the settlement. The land will be closed to your chase." Garrett, defeated but alive, turned and went back to the saloon entrance, his movements heavy. The attention was now back on Billy the Kid. The moment the chief gave his silent permission, the atmosphere shifted back to the desperate hunt. The Apache warriors, however, remained. They watched the white man's conflict with a somber, detached interest. Garrett kicked open the saloon doors. The smell of sawdust, stale beer, and cheap perfume rushed out. "Billy, come out! Don't drag this out, kid!" Garrett's voice roared. Inside, tables were overturned. The only light came from the bullet holes punched through the walls. "Not in the mood for parlor games, Pat." Billy's voice was muffled, coming from the back room. A sudden, sharp shatter of glass. Billy had jumped out a back window, heading for the stables, the very route Pullen had taken moments before. Garrett immediately rushed through the side door to cut him off. Eli knew the layout of Fort Sumner. He knew the stables were connected to a narrow, twisting canyon that led to the high, arid mesa. Cullen watched Eli's eyes follow the chase. "The small one sees the path clearly. You owe the lawman nothing, but you owe the truth to the land. Go, follow, see where the trail leads." The chief challenged him with his gaze. Eli scrambled to his feet, grabbed the flour sack, and picked up the Colt. He didn't question the chief's motives. He felt the weight of the moment demanding his participation. He ran toward the stable, following the echoes of the chase. He found Garrett already mounted, forcing a fresh horse out of the stable. Billy the Kid was barely visible ahead, riding hard into the canyon mouth. "Get out of here, boy! This ain't your fight," Garrett yelled as he spurred his horse. "He's heading for the Dead Horse Canyon. Pullen is out there too." Eli shouted back, but Garrett was already gone, swallowed by the rising dust cloud. Eli mounted Dusty. The mule was slow but steady. He followed the trail into the canyon. The air immediately grew hotter, trapped between the towering red rock walls. The silence of the chase was broken only by the clatter of iron horseshoes on loose stone. The canyon was a serpent's backbone, narrow and winding. The high walls blocked the sun, leaving the trail in oppressive shadow, a dangerous place for an ambush. Eli slowed Dusty, listening. The wind was low here, and every sound carried. Ahead, he heard the faint thud-thud of horses. He knew Garrett was gaining on Billy. Suddenly, a rifle shot rang out, closer than the others. Not Garrett's Winchester. It was a lower, rougher caliber, a cheap gun. Eli urged Dusty forward. He found a small, sheltered alcove just off the main trail. Pullen, the bounty hunter, had ambushed the chase. Pullen was perched on a small rock ledge, his rifle aimed down at the trail. He was aiming not for Garrett, but for Billy's horse. Billy was forced to pull up, dismounting quickly as his mare stumbled. "Gotcha, kid! The sheriff gets the credit, but I get the coin!" Pullen cackled, a vile, triumphant sound. Garrett's voice boomed from just around the bend. "Pullen, you stay out of this!" Billy, now on foot, had found cover behind a thick stand of mesquite. He was trapped between Garrett closing in from the rear and Pullen above, both eager to collect the reward. Eli's dilemma was sharp and immediate. If he helped Garrett, he was cementing the kid's fate and aligning with the law that had brought so much destruction. If he helped the kid, he was aligning with the chaos. But the bounty hunter was a predator, a man without honor. Eli saw a small, unstable scree slope above Pullen's position. It was a risky, desperate move. He grabbed a handful of small, sharp stones. He threw them with all his might against the rock face just above Pullen's head. The scuffing sound startled the bounty hunter. Pullen turned, thinking Garrett was flanking him. "What the—" It was all the time Billy the Kid needed. He emerged from the mesquite, not firing but throwing a handful of dry sand and dust directly into Pullen's eyes. Pullen yelled, dropping his rifle, clawing at his face. Billy didn't shoot. He picked up Pullen's rifle and vanished deeper into the canyon. Garrett arrived, seeing only Pullen staggering blindly. "What in tarnation happened here?" Garrett demanded. "The kid! He threw dirt!" Pullen sputtered, his eyes watering. Garrett looked around. He saw the disturbed scree slope, and then he saw Eli hiding in the alcove, his face covered in sweat, holding the sack of flour. "You, boy, did you have a hand in this?" Garrett's eyes narrowed, seeing the guilt on Eli's face. Eli knew his truth was too complicated. "I just saw him run, Sheriff. I was looking for my mule." Garrett studied the boy for a long moment. He didn't believe him, but he didn't have time. Billy was gone. "Get back to town, boy, before you end up in a pine box." Garrett left Pullen to stumble and spurred his horse deeper into the canyon. Eli watched him go, a single question hanging in the hot air. Why didn't Billy shoot Pullen? The legendary killer had shown a strange restraint. Eli returned to Fort Sumner, the sun beginning its long, brutal descent. The town was still held in the silent, watchful grip of the Apache warriors, who had set up a small, temporary camp near the outskirts, marked by a quiet, spiraling smoke signal. Chief Cullen was sitting by a small, clean fire. He motioned for Eli to approach. "You saw the path of the two men, White Sparrow. What did you learn?" Cullen asked, his tone inquisitive. "I learned the outlaw is faster than the law, but the law is more relentless. And I learned the bounty hunter is the true sickness. He fights for nothing but blood money." Eli sat, feeling the weight of the day's observations settle on him. "And the white killer? Did he kill the sickness?" Cullen studied Eli's reaction. "No, he didn't. He took his gun and left him blind in the sand. I don't know why." Eli frowned, the ambiguity of Billy's action bothering him. Cullen smiled faintly. "The true warrior only kills what he must. The white killer has honor, but it is a wild, untamed kind. It is not the law of the stone." Suddenly the silence was shattered by a commotion from the direction of the fort. 3 dusty, hard-riding men, armed and wearing the drab uniform of the New Mexico militia, rode into town. They were looking for trouble. Captain Reed, 50s, harsh, entitled, the leader, rode directly up to the Apache camp, his horse skittish. "You there, Chief. This land is under the jurisdiction of the United States territory. You move your people now, or we'll run you off." Reed's voice was loud, aggressive, a stark contrast to the previous quiet tension. The Apache warriors remained stoic, but their hands tightened on their knives and bows. Cullen stood up, tall and unhurried. "The jurisdiction of the United States territory is a piece of paper, Captain. The jurisdiction of the earth is in the roots of the mesquite. We hurt no one. We are simply here. We know who you are. You're the ones who raided the ranch near the Pecos last month. I'm taking you in." Reed drew his sidearm, a heavy, well-maintained revolver. The tension was immediate and volatile. The warriors raised their bows, the dry, clicking sound of arrows being notched, chilling in the silence. Eli knew this was the tipping point. The militia, arrogant and outnumbered, would start a massacre. He remembered Cullen's quiet wisdom and the lawman's submission to the stone. He had to act for the Apache now. He stepped forward, placing himself between Reed and the chief. "Captain, sir! These people haven't done anything. They rode in the middle of a gunfight between the sheriff and the kid. They stopped the fighting. They're just passing through, like they said." Eli spoke quickly, his voice high but steady. Reed, confused by the sudden intervention, looked down at the small boy. "Who the hell are you, boy? Get out of the way." "I'm a witness, sir. I saw Sheriff Garrett meet with the chief. They agreed to a truce. They want this town quiet. If you start trouble here, the sheriff will come back and he won't be happy. You'll be crossing the law, not the outlaw." Eli bluffed, using the leverage of the law of the stone to protect the Apache. Reed hesitated. Pat Garrett's name carried real weight. Reed's men were nervous, seeing the ring of ready Apache bows. The militia were bully boys, not actual warriors. "We'll see about that, you little liar." Reed spat, but he lowered his gun. "We're taking a look around. If we find anything—" Reed and his men rode off toward the fort. The moment the militia was out of sight, Cullen turned to Eli. His face was unreadable. "You used the law of the boot to protect the law of the stone. A strange wisdom. Why risk your life for us?" Cullen asked. "Because you were honest. You didn't try to kill me or sell me or use me. You just asked me what I saw. That's more than I can say for most men in this territory." Eli wiped the sweat and dust from his eyes. Cullen nodded, a deep, satisfied gesture. "Your heart is clean, White Sparrow. The great debt is not always owed with blood, but with truth." The final test was coming. Eli knew it, and it would determine whether he belonged to the violence of the white man's world or the harsh, clear-eyed truth of the land. Night had fallen, the desert air now sharp and frigid, a stark contrast to the day's inferno. The sky was an immense black canvas dusted with a million indifferent stars. The only light came from the Apache's small fire and the few flickering lamps in the town. The air was heavy with the scent of pinon smoke. Eli sat by the Apache fire. Cullen's second, KI-30s, silent, powerful, gave Eli a piece of dried venison. The silence was profound, only broken by the occasional whinny of a horse. Suddenly, the unmistakable sound of a single wounded horse galloping hard echoed from the canyon. It was the sheriff's horse. Pat Garrett rode into town, slumped over his saddle, clutching his left arm. He was bleeding badly from a gunshot wound. He pulled his exhausted horse to a stop outside the saloon. "I got him. He's down. But he got me good." Garrett managed, his voice strained. Garrett had found Billy, and the final duel had occurred. Eli rushed to the sheriff's side. "Sir, you're hit. The young viper always leaves a mark. Eli, the kid's at Max's old ranch, South Fork. He won't last the night. Go. Get him. He's already beaten. Tell him I said to drop the gun." Garrett swayed, falling into unconsciousness. The dilemma was absolute. Garrett, the lawman, was a defeated, wounded man, placing his trust, and the final act of the law, in the hands of a boy. Billy, the outlaw, was dying, alone, representing a failed, romanticized freedom. Cullen watched, impassive. The hunter is broken, White Sparrow. The kid dies under a cold sky. What is your choice? To let the law take its course, or to offer the truth of a human heart? Cullen's question was the test. Eli looked at the bleeding sheriff, then at the vast, dark desert where Billy lay dying. He had witnessed the war. Now he had to choose the peace. He mounted Dusty, turning south. The ride was agonizingly slow. The moon was only a sliver, and the shadows were deep and deceptive. Eli reached the abandoned ranch. The air here was still and heavy, a silence that meant death was near. He found Billy the Kid slumped against the porch of the ranch house, his shirt dark with blood. The Colt Peacemaker lay a few feet away, covered in dust. Billy was barely conscious, his breathing shallow. Well, look what the cat dragged in. The errand boy. Billy coughed, a terrible rattling sound. Garrett sent me. He said to drop the gun. He got you, Billy, it's over. Eli's voice was soft, compassionate. It was over the day they painted a price on my head, kid. Garrett. He always wanted the fame, but he didn't have the heart for the kill. Billy looked up at the moonless sky. Why didn't you shoot Pullen back in the canyon? You could have killed him. Eli asked the question that had plagued him all day. Billy managed a weak smile. A rattler only strikes what it eats. That man, he wasn't worth the lead. I only shoot what I have to. The truth is, kid, I just got tired of running. Billy closed his eyes. His breathing stopped. Eli sat with the body of Billy the Kid until the first pale, ghostly light of dawn touched the horizon. He hadn't come for the reward or the capture. He had come to witness the end. He stood up, picked up the Colt Peacemaker, and shoved it into his waistband. He walked over to Billy's horse, which had survived the journey. He took a heavy Winchester rifle from the saddle scabbard. He tied the reins of Billy's horse to his mule, Dusty. Eli rode back to Fort Sumner, leading the dead outlaw's horse. When he arrived, the main street was empty. Pat Garrett was gone. The Apache camp was gone. Only a circle of dark ash remained where Cullen's fire had been. Eli found a note pinned to the door of the general store, written in Garrett's heavy, deliberate hand. Billy the Kid taken, justice served, Pat Garrett, sheriff. Eli understood. Garrett, with the help of the Apache, or perhaps just his own men, had moved the kid's body silently, claiming the victory. The true circumstances of the duel, the shame of being wounded, the involvement of the Apache, the boy who delivered the final message, were buried, replaced by a clean, simple, profitable lie. Eli looked at the sun, now a cold, hard orb over the high mesa. He had witnessed the war between the law and the outlaw, and he realized that the only thing that won was the story, the legend built on a foundation of dust and lies. He dismounted. He walked over to the dry earth where Cullen had placed the stone of law. He knelt, digging a small hole. He placed the heavy Colt Peacemaker, Billy the Kid's gun, into the earth. Then he covered it with the dirt of the territory. He stood up, placing the Winchester on Dusty's saddle. He looked out at the vast, desolate landscape. The only law that mattered was the law of the earth, the silence, and the simple truth of one's own actions. Eli mounted Dusty. He turned his back on the empty town, the buried gun, and the crafted legend. He rode toward the mountains, the heat of the day already beginning to rise, seeking a new, honest path on the frontier. The creak of his saddle was the only sound now, the sound of a boy leaving the old war behind.